want you to just for a second come with me on a thought experiment.
Mm.
Imagine the deepest sleep you've ever had, that profound, heavy rest. And then, like a switch flips, you're awake. Your mind is on. It's crystal clear. You see your room, you recognize everything, but your body is gone. You try to move, you try to scream, but nothing happens. You are completely, utterly trapped inside a silent, frozen shell. And then you realize you're not alone. There's a weight on your chest, this crushing pressure, and a shadow, a figure, is standing over you.
That experience, that is the textbook definition of sleep paralysis,
Yeah.
SP. And it's so terrifyingly universal because it's essentially a neurological glitch, a high stakes one. It's a dissociative state where your brain wakes up, but your body is still stuck in the muscle paralysis, what we call atonia from deep sleep.
And it's that persistence of the paralysis, right?
Right.
Whether it happens as you're falling asleep, the hypnagogic form, or when you wake up, which is the more common one.
The hypnopompic form, yes. You're basically catching your brain in a moment of, well, catastrophic failure. The synchronization is just completely off.
But it's not actually dangerous, medically speaking.
Almost never. Your brain is still handling the important stuff like breathing, but the psychological component is. It's so intense. The data is pretty clear on this. Over 75% of these episodes involve vivid, multisensory hallucinations, and they are almost always terrifying.
So that's our mission in this deep dive, to bridge that gap, to take this, biological broken switch in our sleep cycle.
And show how it creates this universal archetype of fear. We really want to get to the bottom of it. Why does this one single neurological event across every culture on Earth create the exact same threatening bedroom intruder?
Okay, so let's unpack that core paradox first. The fear really stems from that disconnect, right? Your mind is on, but your body is completely off.
Exactly. And you have to understand that atonia, that paralysis, is normally a good thing. It's your brain's security system.
It's for the REM phase, the dreaming phase.
Right. Rapid eye movement. When you're dreaming, your brain silences your motor system so you don't physically act out whatever's happening in your head. But during sleep paralysis, your mind is conscious, or at least partially, but your body is still in that mandated lockdown. You can't move your arms, your legs, your head, nothing.
That sounds like the ultimate feeling of vulnerability.
Yeah,
To be lucid, aware, but just locked down.
it is. And even if an episode only lasts for, say, a few seconds or maybe a couple of minutes,
That must feel like an eternity.
people consistently describe it as the most frightening experience of their entire life. The panic is immediate.
And what really elevates this from just a weird physical state to, genuine terror are the hallucinations that come with it.
Yes. And they seem to fall into these incredibly predictable categories. No matter who you are or where you live, research calls it Chain's grouping 3 primary archetypes.
And they often happen together, don't they? They layer on top of each other to make it worse.
Oh, absolutely. Most experiences are a combination of at least 2 of them. It's a perfect storm of sensory chaos.
So let's start with the big one, the one that gives sleep paralysis its dramatic flair. The intruder.
The intruder. This is defined by an overwhelming, almost primal sensed presence. And this isn't just a vague feeling of being watched. People describe it as an unshakable, definitive belief that another entity is in the room with them.
Something demonic or just
Yeah,
malevolent.
exactly. And it often comes with sounds, footsteps, whispering, or visual things like shadows in the corner of your eye.
So what's the theory there? Where does that come from?
The thinking is that this hypervigilant, fearful state originates deep in the midbrain, the amygdala specifically. Your body is locked down, but your brain's threat detection system is screaming, danger. And because it can't reconcile the paralysis with the panic, it invents an external cause. It has to be something holding you down.
Which leads right into the second type, the
Yeah.
physical part, the incubus.
They're a package deal, usually, the intruder and the incubus.
Right, and the incubus is that physical crushing pressure on the chest.
Yes. That feeling of being suffocated, choked, or squeezed. Historically, this was taken very literally. A demon or some other creature was sitting on your chest.
The breathing difficulty is what I find fascinating. Are you actually unable to breathe, or does it just feel that way?
It's largely the latter, but the feeling is intensely real. During rematonia, only your diaphragm is working for automatic breathing. All the other muscles you'd use for a deep, conscious breath are paralyzed.
So you are breathing, just shallowly.
Just enough to stay alive, but not enough to calm a panicked brain. Your amygdala is firing, triggering a panic response, telling you to take a deep breath, but you can't. And when that deep breath fails, your brain registers suffocation. It's a terrifying feedback loop.
So you have the external threat, the intruder, and the immediate physical threat, the incubus. But there's a third one which sounds like it has the most potential to be misinterpreted as something supernatural.
That would be the unusual bodily experience, or the vestibular motor type. This one is less about an external threat and more about your internal world dissolving. It involves sensations of false movement, floating, swaying, or even full-blown out-of-body experiences.
So this is where people feel like they're hovering over their own bed, watching themselves sleep.
Exactly. That's called autoscopy. They feel detached, weightless. It's often accompanied by buzzing or vibrational sensations. This one is crucial because it forms the basis for a lot of, say, alien abduction narratives.
And all of this psychological chaos comes with very real, measurable physical symptoms.
Absolutely. The sympathetic nervous system, your fight or flight, is fully engaged. People report heart palpitations, sweating, chest pain, nausea, shaking.
It's no wonder people think they're having a heart attack or are about to die.
Yeah.
The feeling of suffocation alone would be enough.
And that's the critical thing for you to understand. These symptoms feel intensely real because the parts of your brain that detect threat are firing at peak alert. This huge anxiety can trigger a full-blown panic attack, which, tragically, might actually make the paralysis last longer. The more afraid you get, the more your body locks down.
So we have the experience, the terror, but to really get it, we have to look under the hood at the brain's wiring. Where does that switch actually break?
Okay, so we have to look at the normal sleep cycle, the
Wow.
dance between NREM and REM sleep. NREM, non-rapid eye movement, is your deep, quiet sleep. Your mind is calm.
And then you transition into REM,
Mhm.
and that's when the brain just lights up, active dreaming.
Exactly. The brain is incredibly active, intense electrical activity in the brainstem and the cortex. That's what generates the vivid dreams. But here's the key. To stop you from, jumping out of bed while you're dreaming of flying, the brainstem imposes that profound muscle atonia. It paralyzes you.
So the body's paralyzed specifically when the brain is in that high alert dreaming state.
Precisely. And in its most common form, sleep paralysis is just that atonia lingering for a bit after your mind snaps awake. The signals get out of sync.
But there's another way it can happen, right? Something about microwave fragments.
Yes. This is interesting. Sometimes these little bursts of neural activation can happen during deep NREM sleep. So even though you're in that quiet, non-dreaming phase, these little bits of wakefulness pop up.
And that's enough to activate the dream machine and the fear systems. But the body is still paralyzed from being in deep sleep.
That's it. Your mind starts waking up before the body's paralysis has had a chance to switch off. The end result is the same.
So what causes those fragments? Is it stress? Lack of sleep?
It's often a mix. Sleep deprivation and emotional stress are big factors. Neurologically, it seems related to slight imbalances in neurotransmitters like serotonin and dopamine, which are critical for regulating sleep. Those imbalances can lead to more fragmented sleep and also to more negative mental states, which is why the hallucinations are so often grotesque and frightening.
Okay, now let's connect that failure directly to the fear, the feeling of a threat, the intruder.
That feeling is highly correlated with hyperactivation in the amygdala. The amygdala is naturally very active during REM sleep. We process a lot of emotion in our dreams, so when you're yanked out of REM into this weird paralyzed state, that high amygdala activation just keeps going. It puts you on immediate high alert, but there's no motor feedback. So the brain translates that internal feeling of threat into an external one. Something is coming for me.
So the body's internal alarm bell is what creates the monster outside. But the sources also pointed to the temporal lobes being involved.
Yes, this is fascinating. The feeling of a presence is strongly associated with electrophysiological changes in the temporal areas of the brain. The temporal lobe handles things like hearing, memory, complex sensory stuff, and we see this pop up in other neurological conditions, which really ties SP to physical brain events.
What kind of links are we talking about?
Well, the right temporal area is particularly involved. People report a felt presence after a traumatic brain injury in that area, or during epileptic auras, that sensory warning before a seizure. Patients will describe a shadow figure or a presence just before it happens. One person even described it as being preceded by an electric shock sensation, which is a common report in SPAN. It's a consistent neurological glitch.
It's incredible. The idea that the brain, when it's stressed in that specific spot, produces such a consistent error message.
Mhm.
The intruder isn't a random thought, it's a default setting for that kind of error.
It is absolutely a hardwired interpretation of conflicting data. And some of the visual hallucinations, the ones you get while falling asleep, show increased activity in the parietal occipital regions, your brain's vision and spatial systems. Researchers have even found a shared pattern of brain activation between these hallucinations and some elements of schizophrenic delusions. It shows that the systems for telling self from non self are just completely disorganized.
And to really hammer this home, scientists have actually managed to artificially create that feeling of a presence in healthy, awake people.
This is where it gets really mind bending because it isolates the mechanism. In one study, the presence detected protocol, they put people in a state of sensory deprivation and then used weak magnetic stimulation over their temporal lobes. And that mild, localized stimulation was enough to induce the feeling of being watched, of an intruder.
So just by messing with the electricity in that one spot, you can convince a wide awake person they're not alone.
It proves the feeling of presence isn't tied to what you see or hear. It's an internal calculation gone wrong. And there's an even more high-tech example involving robotics.
The master-slave system. How do you use robots to create a ghost?
So the person would make simple finger movements on a touchpad. That's the master input. At the same time, a robotic arm, the slave, was touching their back in the same pattern. Your brain expects perfect sync between your action and the feeling on your back.
But then they introduced a delay, a mismatch.
Exactly. They'd delay the robot's touch by just a fraction of a second or make it slightly different. And the moment the robot's movement diverged from the person's intended movement, they reported a felt presence.
Because the brain's internal map of itself got confused. When the input and output didn't match, it created an external entity to explain the discrepancy.
It's an internal accounting error. Confuse the brain's sense of its own body, and it immediately defaults to interpreting an outside intentional agent.
Which brings us to how the intruder feels so intentional. It's not just a shadow, it's a demon with a purpose. And that's where the mirror neuron system comes in.
The MNS is fundamental to how we understand other people. These neurons fire when we do an action, and when we see someone else do that same action, it's how we read intention. Now, apply that to being paralyzed. The MNS is still active, trying to make sense of things.
But there's no movement happening. So the MNS is suggesting action, but the body isn't responding.
Correct. So you get what researchers call a dual representation. The brain is holding two conflicting models at once. I am here, motionless, and someone is moving in a way I recognize. The MNS is basically simulating the actions of the intruder because it can't account for the paralysis of itself. That is the neurological construction of the ghost in your bedroom.
It's just an astonishing system failure. The wiring is so clear. But what's even more amazing is how humanity, for thousands of years, all arrived at the same basic demon.
That's the ultimate proof of how rigid the physiological event is. The science explains how the hallucination is created, but culture explains what we name it.
We have to start with the most famous painting of this, Henry Fuseli's 1781 work, The Nightmare. It's basically a perfect diagram of the symptoms.
It's a clinical chart disguised as art, absolutely. You see the sleeping woman in that supine position embodying the paralysis. Then you have the grotesque creature, the incubus, sitting right on her chest. That's the pressure, the anxiety.
And then there's the horse, the mare, peering through the curtain, which is a common misunderstanding of the word nightmare, right?
It is. The word nightmare comes from the Old English mare, which was a nocturnal spirit, a presser. It had nothing to do with a female horse. Feasley was an educated guy. He almost certainly knew that and was playing with the language.
And that idea of oppressing spirit links right into the folklore from the Middle Ages.
Yes, the concepts of the incubus and the succubus male and female demons emerged then. It linked the physical reality of sleep paralysis to societal anxieties about sin and desire. The pressure and fear were framed as a demonic sexual assault.
What's incredible is how that core pattern, the pressure, the presence, shows up in cultures that had zero contact with European folklore.
It's the strongest argument that the experience itself is what creates the belief. We can just run through a few examples. In Brazil, they have the legend of the Pisadera, she who steps. She's a skinny old woman with long, dirty nails who steps on the chest of people who sleep on their back after a big meal.
It's a perfect match for the symptoms and the risk factors.
Exactly. In Newfoundland, it's being hag-ridden. In Turkey, it's karabasan, a jinn that strangles you. In Greece, it's mora, a creature that steals your speech. That inability to cry out.
The Asian examples are just as powerful.
In Thailand and Cambodia, it's Fiam, a ghost holding you down. The Vietnamese call it Made, held down by a ghost. The Hmong people call it Dab Sog, a nocturnal pressing spirit. The name changes, but the physical sensation is identical.
And there was that powerful example from Cambodian refugees linking the experience directly to historical trauma.
That study is critical. Researchers found a very high incidence of SP among them, 42%, and it was highly associated with PTSD. They called it Kamosh Sankat, the ghost that pushes you down.
But for them, the ghost wasn't just some generic demon.
No, they tied the physical symptoms directly to their traumatic memories of the Pol Pot regime. The chest pressure was associated with near drowning or the pain from forced labor. The ghost was sometimes described as wearing a Khmer Rouge uniform. It shows how trauma can amplify and focus the fear from the underlying glitch.
And from historical trauma, we move to a modern myth: alien abduction.
The hypothesis that alien abduction stories come from SP is incredibly strong. The accounts line up perfectly. They almost always start the same way: waking up on your back, unable to move, feeling intense terror, buzzing sensations, difficulty breathing.
And then the beings appear. And the feeling of floating is interpreted as being physically taken from the room.
Precisely. And what's key is that the researchers found that many of these abductees were otherwise perfectly mentally healthy. They weren't delusional. Their minds were just trying to explain an inexplicable, terrifying sensory event using a modern, culturally available story. In the 18th century, it's a hag. Today, it's an alien.
So that brings us back to the big debate. Does culture create the demon, or does the experience create the culture?
Well, you have two theories. The cultural source hypothesis says you hear the stories first, so when you have SP, your brain just fills in the blanks with what it already knows.
But the other idea, the experiential source hypothesis, suggests the reverse.
Right. David Hufford, a folklorist, argued that the physiological event is so intensely patterned and so terrifying that it's biologically designed to inspire supernatural belief, even in people with no prior knowledge. The experience is so real, it forces people to create new myths like shadow people or alien abductions to explain it.
So the question for you, the listener, is whether your culture just gives a name to a pre-existing terror, or if the terror itself is so profound it forces culture into existence.
A real chicken and egg question of belief.
Okay, now let's get practical. Who is most at risk for this? What are the things that flip that switch in the brain?
First off, it's common. Around 20% of people will experience this at some point in their life. It usually starts in the teen years and continues into the 20s and 30s.
And there's a genetic link, right? Some people are just more prone to it.
There is. A family history is a significant predictor. It suggests the stability of your sleep cycle can be inherited.
But the studies on university students really highlighted the behavioral factors, the things we can actually control.
Yes. And the single biggest predictor they found was messing with your sleep schedule, which overwhelmingly points to one thing: napping.
Napping, really.
Frequent napping, longer naps, napping at weird times of the day, all strong predictors of SP. You're basically introducing little unstable bits of REM sleep into your daytime schedule.
And that instability is the enemy. So poor sleep quality in general is a huge factor.
A massive predictor. Irregular sleep schedules, going to bed late, waking up late, disrupt the brain's routine. And when that routine is off, the transition points between sleep stages become very, very unstable.
What about physical position? The folklore about the Pisadera mentions sleeping on your back.
And the folklore is spot on. Sleeping in the supine position correlates very strongly with increased SP. For one, it's the position most associated with REM sleep. But more importantly, it makes arousal from things like snoring or sleep apnea much more likely.
So you stop breathing for a second, your body panics and tries to wake you up, but you're still locked down in rematonia.
The perfect physiological storm for sleep paralysis.
Any substances we should be aware of?
Alcohol and caffeine are the big ones. They both disrupt the continuity of your sleep cycles. Interestingly, one study found nicotine didn't have a significant impact, but alcohol and caffeine definitely do.
And then there was that really weird finding about noise.
That was genuinely surprising. One study found that not living in a noisy area actually increased SP frequency.
So silence is a risk factor.
It might be. The hypothesis is that some constant ambient noise, like a fan or traffic, might help stabilize the brain during sleep. A totally silent room might make the brain more likely to misinterpret its own internal sounds as an external threat.
And beyond lifestyle, frequent SP can also be a sign of deeper underlying health issues.
That's when it moves from being an isolated, weird event to a real symptom. It can be a classic sign of narcolepsy, or it can be linked to mental health conditions like PTSD, bipolar disorder, or general anxiety. Those conditions actively destabilize the sleep cycle.
So for anyone listening who suffers from this, what are the practical takeaways? What can you do?
The strategies are all about stability and reframing. First, the behavioral stuff. Get on a regular, healthy sleep schedule. Aim for 7 to 9 hours. Avoid big meals, caffeine, or alcohol right before bed.
And, critically, change your sleeping position.
Absolutely. Avoid sleeping on your back at all costs. Some people will literally sew a tennis ball onto the back of their pajamas to stop them from rolling over.
But what if an episode is already happening? How do you break out of it?
The advice is to focus on small, deliberate movements. Try to wiggle one finger or one toe. The paralysis isn't a total disconnection, so focusing all your will on one tiny muscle can sometimes be enough to break the cycle and wake your body up.
Focus on the smallest point of resistance.
Exactly. And also, for people with partners, knowing that being touched or spoken to can immediately snap you out of it is really important.
And finally, the mental shift, which must be the hardest part when you're in the middle of it.
It's the most critical long-term strategy, and it's why understanding the science is so powerful. It's about knowing the demons aren't real, knowing the crushing weight is just a perceptual glitch, and crucially, knowing that it's temporary, it will only last a few minutes. Since fear itself seems to make the paralysis last longer, reducing that anxiety during the event is the most potent weapon you have. You just have to rename the terror. It's not a demon, it's a misfiring temporal lobe.
So we started this deep dive with that primal terror of waking up trapped and seeing a demon. And what we found is a story of synchronization failure. The brainstem, the amygdala, the motor cortex, all hitting the wrong notes at once.
We've seen how that glitch manifests as those three universal archetypes: the intruder, the incubus, the out-of-body experience. And we've tracked that exact same pattern from ancient folklore of the night hag right up to the modern myths of alien abductors.
Sleep paralysis is this profound illustration of how the brain, just under a little bit of stress or disruption, creates this universal template for terror. An entirely natural, explainable glitch that has generated centuries of supernatural belief.
Which leaves us with a final question for you to think about. If a purely natural event, a predictable malfunction of your own brain, can be so powerfully real that it defines global folklore for millennia, what does that tell us about the true source of our deepest fears? Does understanding the science really make the shadow in the corner disappear? Or does it just confirm that the most terrifying thing we will ever encounter is our own mind's capacity to manufacture absolute dread?